Hello there, my name is Warren Bailey and I am the Senior Business Developer here at Prolific Solutions. Let me go ahead and get the sales pitch out of the way. We are a security services and software company and the creators of the product ProVM Auditor, which for those that don't know helps you to compile data from multiple vulnerability assessment scanners into consolidated report. If you've never heard of it before and you perform vulnerability assessments, I encourage you to check it out. We've got a 5-minute video and a 2-week fully functional trial here at our product page for the software itself. So I'm going to be talking to you about an issue that I am pretty passionate about, how security needs to get away from fear tactics to push across our agenda and be able to talk to the businesses in terms they understand. Return on investment, how security brings value to the business. So a little bit about me and why I'm passionate about this. I was your typical college kid in undergrad, maybe a little credit card debt, and not buying extravagant things, but not necessarily living within my means. My girlfriend here, who thankfully later became my wife, was brought up from a family that could squeeze the copper out of a penny. Together we started budgeting in college. Yes, that's right, we budgeted in college. Now that TV you see here on the left was a 35-inch TV that we dug out of the dumpster, took it to a repair guy, and $150 later had a new TV, other than maybe a little smelling. So the throes of poor college kids' life, right? As we got a little older and made a little more money, I remember when we first got a GPS, and we were really excited because, this was before smartphones and Gas Buddy, mind you. We'd be driving along on a trip and look up the gas stations in the GPS to call them along the way to see who had the cheapest gas. So I say all this to say I appreciate the value of a dollar, which really something that fits right along lines with this subject matter. I also didn't grow up hacking as a kid or have a CS undergrad degree. I actually grew up through the sales industry, so I washed cars in a suit and tie at an Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and I did some technology reselling with Soft Choice Corporation, and I've been the senior biz dev guy here at Prolific Solutions, or ProSo for short, the last few years. So I've got a bent towards the business side of the security industry and don't have your typical knee-jerk reactions to why security is important. You know what I'm talking about, those scare tactics. So business leaders across all industries are concerned with one thing: profit. And of course, entrepreneurs start businesses for many reasons. They want freedom, or they develop a niche offering, or they want to serve clients in their community, but they all must turn a profit to thrive, much less survive. It's paramount that businesses take in more money than they spend in order to keep the open sign in the front window. So return on investment, or ROI, is the fundamental business strategy for profit. ROI governs every strategic decision, from starting the business to expanding, or what vendors to utilize, or what technology to procure. If the investment is not going to bring a return, or not enough return, it's either limited or changed or abandoned. Many times this is where we in the information security field have missed the boat. InfoSec managers have long tried to convince leadership to approve security budgets using scare tactics. Although these threats are very real and they need to be learned from, we peddle the latest security breaches, explaining that you don't want this to be us, do you? Without providing any value to the security investment itself. The result of this strategy may have paid off in budget approvals for many, but it's also brought very negative connotations towards security for everyone. Because of this, InfoSec can sometimes be viewed by business leaders as the black hole of the IT department, viewed only as a cost center and presenting no value for the organization. The heart of the business is ROI, and until we can communicate to the business in terms they understand, this view of InfoSec will remain prevalent, budget requests will continue to get pushed back, and the value of security to the enterprise will never fully be understood. Security needs to apply sound metrics to demonstrate this value. Many organizations base their security decisions on perceived risks. When they understand the strength of their security program should be relative to the level of risk, but their risk level is determined based more on experience than analysis. Basing security strength on the value of the asset itself is sound security practice. Like an organization that might hold top secret or personal financial information, they need to have more stringent security than one that does not hold that type of information. But just because you don't house any top secret data doesn't mean you're not a target. Many hackers just scan the internet looking for IPs suffering from common vulnerabilities to exploit. I mean, if your IP range falls into their scope for that scan, you're a target. Now, many believe their security program is successful simply because there haven't been any significant security incidents impacting their organization. And this logic is really as short-sighted as claiming that not crashing a car while driving without headlights on at night means you're driving in the right direction. Gauging the success of a security program on the lack of severe incidents is a really useless metric. The lack of severe incidents might be equally indicative of excessive security or merely good luck, or that impacts simply haven't been detected. A great example of this is the highly publicized TJX company's loss of some 46 million credit records. The sheer size of this breach is exacerbated by the fact that it wasn't discovered until some 18 months later. A security program without metrics cannot adequately measure the success of that program. And this also leads to security applied in a reactive manner. Organizations apply security measures simply because they've experienced incidents in those avenues. Peter Drucker was a management consultant, an educator, and an author, and his writings contributed to the philosophical and practical foundations of the modern business corporation. Bottom line, we measure to manage. Driving in the dark without the lights on is not an efficient way to reach your objective. Metrics allows InfoSec professionals the opportunity to gauge the success of security endeavors, see what's working, address what's not. And this proves valuable in an ever-changing threat landscape. When you get an ongoing feedback enables security programs to be more agile. And metrics leads to more productivity, more security, and lower cost. Really, what other evidence is needed to support the practice of security metrics? Well, how about this? Just as metrics enables management, the lack of metrics enables aspects of the security program to go unaddressed. So is security metrics really worth it? And if you drive without your lights on, what's going to happen? You're going to crash at some point, right? So what are some consequences of poor or non-existent security metrics to the security program itself? You're not going to fully understand your threat landscape. When you don't understand your threats, it's hard to understand your specific risks. And then you are unable to clearly prioritize your projects, which leads to a waste of company resources by working on the wrong things or having duplicate projects, tasks, or code going on at the same time. And it's even harder still to create standard processes and procedures to guard against your threats because you're running around addressing your perceived risk all the time, which causes confusion and a loss of momentum. Then you're not able to head in a clear direction towards security objectives. And with all of this going on, it's very doubtful that you can wrap your own head around the value of security to yourself, much less be able to explain this to the business. So hopefully it's clear that metrics are a crucial aspect to the success of any security program. And if I haven't made a good enough case why metrics are important by now, go ahead and exit out of this presentation. You're finished. But not just any metrics will do. We cannot rely on the standard security metrics to show value to the business. You know the ones: vulnerabilities found, patch level, touting a compliance score. Although these metrics are applicable to the right audience, they are not the heart of the businesses that we support. Rob Reck wrote an article on metrics and stated that we are implementing security based on our own priorities and goals rather than on what makes the larger organization successful. Whenever we talk about the success of our security program in terms of an adherence to an industry standard, a best practice, or a framework, we're defining our goals based on the requirements of a third party. A third party who does not have the specific interests of our organization in mind. Now, this is far better than using perceived risk or lack of severe security incidents as a barometer, but this method still relies on the structure of a third party, and just as businesses differ widely from one to another, so must security programs. The Robert Francis Group conducted a survey to measure the current security metric practices going on, and they found that nearly all participants reported metrics, but only a few of these felt these practices were effective. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that metrics here are not worth collecting, but how these metrics or any other metric is portraying value to executives really is the real issue. This is the real issue. Security practitioners need to be able to communicate how the security program is bringing a return to the business investment. So, how do we do that? How do we get beyond the so what? Richard Searson, a security principal at Kaiser Permanente, spoke on this very issue at a security metrics conference. And many times security professionals present the company with vulnerabilities that must be fixed with additional investments in technology or people. Searson's main message was to be prepared for the inevitable question. Executives are going to ask you, so what? I mean, they want to know, and they want you to tell them why this information should matter to them. Searson goes on to explain that metrics are based on three aspects: value, time, and risk. To get beyond the so what, security professionals need to be able to explain the value of the asset, the time involved in mitigating the threat, and the risk the threat poses. The real key is to be able to define to executives the valuable business resources that are threatened. Our next step is communication. For instance, we can't ever respond to so what with out of cycle remediation to decrease, and there should be a high correlation with exploitability and risk and blah 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 blah. Security professionals need to communicate in a way that resounds with their audience. Instead, a response like these actively exploitable flaws threaten internet access and our critical business applications, and the solution must be deployed in one business day by the end of the fourth fiscal quarter. I mean, this response will be more appropriate. Being able to effectively communicate how you're protecting the company can be just as important as protecting the company itself. Milo Frank actually wrote a book entitled How to Get Your Point Across in 30 Seconds or Less. In it, he indicates the attention span of the average individual is, yes, you guessed it, around 30 seconds. We need to be able to fulfill in this limited time span by getting our message out quickly. This is commonly known as an elevator pitch, and as cliche as it sounds, it's true. And there might be an opportunity when a C-level employee notices your badge and asks you what you do for the company. Being able to communicate quickly in a way that resounds with them is very effective. And the same holds true in any meeting you have with leadership. We've got to be able to communicate effectively and efficiently. So I know we've been talking a lot about ROI, but let's break it down real fast. The basic calculation is a benefit to cost ratio, or BCR, which compares program benefits to program costs. I mean, it's pretty simple. The benefit to cost ratio of 3-to-1 means that for every dollar invested, you get $3 back, which translates into an ROI of 200%. After all the costs are covered, a return of $2. Great ROI. The difficulty here is that InfoSec ROI is measured as a reduction of risk. So this can be a difficult task to explain to management. Some aspects of security have a direct return on investment, but they're generally realized because of a benefit in efficiency. By and large, security is not implemented to make the company more money. Rather, it helps to protect the company itself. As such, there will never be a direct return on the security investment, unless, of course, a threat was mitigated that could have had monetary consequences, perhaps. The value security brings to the business is the reduction of the business's risk. So let's also put it out there that we understand that no business will ever be 100% secure. I know you've all heard this saying that you can only guarantee security by locking it up in a safe and throwing it to the bottom of a sea. Businesses cannot operate this way, and therefore, unless you can hold your breath for a long time, and therefore, we'll always work with some risk. Known risk can be reduced, but there will always be unknown risk that cannot. AdStake Incorporated, which was acquired by Symantec a while back, actually attempted to quantify ROSI, or the return on a security investment. And they analyzed the data of over 600 organizations to determine which security-related activities provide the most positive return purely from a financial perspective. Now keep in mind, these results of this study were highly controversial and fiercely protested. But they present an interesting illustration, and they found that screen locking had the biggest ROSI, while central access control down here had the worst. Of course, screen locking is very cheap to implement, while access control may not be. Keep in mind too, any images that you see will be presented, or you can actually grab a PDF of our presentation at the same place you're viewing the presentation. So if you need to see the images and study them in more depth, you can do that, or pause the presentation, obviously. The first step in attempting to demonstrate security ROI or ROSI or whatever you want to call it is first to understand the objectives of our businesses, how employees are expected to achieve these objectives, and what technology is utilized to fulfill on them. And this will enable the security team to get a good grasp of what they're there to accomplish. It's also going to provide us with the understanding of what metrics should be kept and analyzed. If a metric is not indicating how security is supporting these objectives, even if indirectly, it's not providing value for the business and should be either changed or not continue to be measured whatsoever. Identifying how security directly supports business objectives can be just as difficult as explaining security ROI. Security is unlike other departments. For instance, the sales department directly supports business objectives by finding clients and supporting existing clients, etc. Security support of objectives is more indirect. It helps to protect the information around the sales department and their clients. And it can also help to find automations and technology and processes that will increase the sales team's efficiency. But once business objectives are understood, security objectives must be aligned along with them. We must have a balance between security and the business. Security must be able to clearly communicate its objectives. All too often, we implement controls that hinder the efficiency of the business without considering business objectives. We've got to always keep in mind the business objectives when analyzing controls and their metrics. And this will ensure that the security team is providing both value and protection to the business simultaneously. So once you've fully understood business objectives and how security aligns and support those objectives, the next step is to find out from business leaders, managers, employees, what type of metrics matter to them. Although common security metrics might internally show how mature the security program is, it might not matter to the business audience. We need to identify valuable cross-functional metrics intended for the specified audience. Now, I'm not saying that the business needs to investigate and decide on their own what metrics the security team will use, and they probably wouldn't be able to know where to start. But security needs to be able to find out what matters to their audience. Now, there are several effective ways to find out what matters. Here's just a few examples. It might be beneficial to find out what metrics the industry takes, or if you've got a good relationship with other companies in your industry, possibly reviewing their security metrics. You could bring in groups of employees to ask them directly what type of metrics would matter to them. And it's crucial to meet with executives to decide which metrics should be conducted, and these metrics show how security is bringing a return on their investment. Surveys can be completed both anonymously or with identified respondents, and obviously anonymity helps to encourage freedom of opinion. Awareness training sessions are a good way to both identify what metrics work for incoming personnel and also train users how to interpret commonly reported security metrics already being taken. And don't be afraid to be creative. Running contests with valuable prizes can help to increase exposure and also encourage feedback. Providing security metrics in a way that matters to the audience will create better buy-in from all layers of employment. And after all, this is a major aspect of our security programs, right? Buy-in. After these metrics have been implemented, it'd be good, or it would be beneficial to request periodic feedback. And this will allow us to continually monitor our metric effectiveness. A good suggestion is to establish a war room of sorts to present current metrics graphically. War rooms encourage adequate, up-to-date metrics, obviously, and they provide availability for anyone to review the success of the security program at their own leisure. And you can also conduct periodic surveys to poll the employee base on the effectiveness of the security program itself and its metrics, and it allows you to adapt for changes. So it might seem that dedicating this much resources to security metrics and their interpretations really isn't worth the time. And although the initial investment may be great, and really the results may not always be the ones that we anticipate, but think about the payoffs in transparency and inclusiveness and collaboration. The results from these efforts are tangible and realizable, and they can add major value to the organization. So because of the difficulty to explain security ROI and value, communication must be poignant. We need to know our audience, whether board members or executives or managers or entry-level employees, and we need to tailor our metrics to their perception. To illustrate this point, security metrics has been many times been compared to navigating an aircraft. A pilot requires three types of information in order to fly a plane. Strategic information, which is provided by the navigational systems. management or tactical information such as altitude or airspeed, turn, and bank. And then there's operational information including oil pressure, temperature, and fuel level. Now, these three types of information are very similar to the types of information a business needs to keep its own plane airborne. And business leaders need strategic information supporting businesses' objectives. Metrics must be at a high level. We need to show how the security program is aligning with those strategic objectives. Management information is needed by system managers. These types of metrics need to define how security is promoting efficiency and security to their role. And operational information is more tailored to the technical aspects of security and used to measure the technical success of the security program itself, and really geared more towards security professionals, obviously. However, a jargon-free metric provided to employees can help to show how the security program is supporting their job functions. Metrics should be presented not only to portray value to the intended audience, but they should also motivate the audience toward actions that promote security success. Metrics need to be tailored to encourage the desired action or behavior in each of these specified groups. For executives, obviously, you would need metrics that encourage the executives to promote security ventures. And although fear-mongering for security funds shouldn't be performed, there are real threats that need to be analyzed and the cost-benefit compared of those threats. And employees, obviously, would need a different data set that would encourage them to exhibit adherence to the security program itself. Each organizational group here needs metrics to encourage the desired action to achieve a strong security program. So let's give a few suggestions. The Robert Francis Group, which I mentioned previously, suggested that companies lean too heavily on technical metrics rather than metrics that measure users. And they believe that companies still do not focus enough on internal users. Obviously, past studies have repeatedly shown that employees, whether by accident or intentional acts, can still form the largest single source of security violations to enterprise environments. RVG went on to suggest starting with metrics that are generally easy to collect, such as attempts to access unauthorized website content via content filtering products, or invalid login attempts could be quantified and measured pre and post security training perhaps. And you got unauthorized attempts to access controlled sources like VPN. Again, these metrics are easily to calculate and analyze. Commonly, we kind of have a tendency to dumb down the visual representations of metrics for our executives, particularly overusing that red, yellow, and green matrices that we have a tendency to overuse. Andrew Jaquith, founder of SecurityMetrics.org, states that a CEO's favorite visualization of metrics is a stock chart, a 1-inch square that contains a month's worth of opening and closing prices, a trend line, and several other indicators, maybe 50 or more data points right there. CEOs and business leaders can handle complex data charts as long as it's presented well. And with that in mind, let's look at a few examples Jaquith presents. You actually may have seen some of these before if you search for security metrics. Now, I understand the screenshot here is blurry, but it was the best I could do, and you can get the point. I was actually going to rebuild these graphics here, but yeah, not going to do that. So this metric presents both the percentage of devices covered by antivirus and anti-spyware, antivirus in red and anti-spyware in green here, and the average number of days here on the x-axis since their last update. This can be broken down by department as it's done here, or resource, or really whatever you desire. Jaquith suggests that the coverage should be in the 94 to 98th percentile range. And you can see from this graphic pretty easily that anti-spyware in green is lagging behind antivirus in red, and that the sales department down here, you got sales here and sales over here. They need some help. Speaking as a sales guy, we always need help, right? So Jaquith suggests it could be maybe a remote worker issue. And the IT department is pinging up here on the top left. So the resources are there. They just need to be applied to the rest of the departments. So this graph or metric on patch latency, Jaquith suggests looking for departments here that appear out of scale with the overall findings of the organization. Again, sales is a culprit here, accounting for almost half of all of the missing patches on desktops here in green. And you can see the scale obviously is definitely out of whack. And then marketing scale here is also heavy on the server side, which could mean they're having problems patching web servers, or I mean, it can mean a lot of things. Maybe they got a rogue deployment of servers, perhaps. So this is both an easy and entertaining metric to perform. We can simply use a commonly available password cracking program and attempt to break into systems with weak passwords. The graphic here is actually a password dump from the Billabong breach. And as long as you can perform this and represent it in a democratic way, you could use this metric to potentially target senior leadership who themselves might use weak passwords. Of course, as long as you're not scared of losing your job. You could also create a competition maybe and measure the time it takes to crack passwords among competing departments. And this is really a great way to exhibit the importance of password strength to employees. So tree graphs are great at being able to present complex data in a quickly digestible manner. This specific tree represents 4 variables: the geographic region, the relative size of the region, obviously the bigger the block, the more devices represented, the department, and platform compliance status, which from red to green, color obviously representing the severity of the problem. I mean, you can quickly understand the most basic meaning here. A big red box is a hotspot that needs the most immediate attention. It's like the IT group here in Africa and the operations group here in Europe. So this metric can represent any number, or can be represented in any number of given ways. And it analyzes the incoming and outgoing email traffic, volume, the size, and the flow between the organizations and others. The number of emails are located here on the x-axis and the fiscal quarter on the y-axis here. The thicker the line itself actually indicates the larger the average email size. You've got 4 main company experiences here. You've got a product rollout, and here up here was a patent dispute. And this was vacation week, and obviously, as expected, traffic was low on vacation week. And then you've got an earnings announcement. So really what specifically piqued my interest in this metric is the ability to track possible employees divulging intellectual property, or IP. And like during the large email sizes present here during a patent dispute, that's kind of something that needs to be investigated more. You've got large email sizes being sent and received during that time. And it's also interesting to note that all the large email sizes being sent after a return from vacation week, which could also mean something that needs to be addressed. So lots of metric recommendations have been suggested, and really many more available. You're really only limited by your own creativity. And no matter what metrics you decide to implement, the important thing is to stand up a formal security metrics program. You might already be collecting metrics informally. Making this a formal part of the security program by instituting procedure and policy around metrics will solidify the value it adds. There's a couple of resources you can Google. NIST Special Publication 800-55, and they provide assistance in the development, selecting, and implementing security measures and metrics, and also provides some templates to guide measurements of different aspects of a security program. And then the security benchmarks understood that the struggle we had as practitioners of deciding on what the right metrics were, and they decided to establish a consensus group of over 150 government, private, and academic experts to reach a consensus on an initial set of metrics. So how critical is metrics to security? I refer back to Peter Drucker's poignant statement: what gets measured gets managed. We've got to turn our lights on, our headlights on. We can't lean on past experience, the lack of security incidents, perceived risk, or fully rely on a compliance score as a barometer of our security program's success. And this leads to a misunderstanding of risk, a mismanagement of the security program itself, and really missing the ability to explain value, or ROI, of the security to the business. We've also got to get away from the metrics we all know so well. These types of metrics don't necessarily show value to our business. Don't be scared to get creative and base all metrics on value, time, and risk to business objectives and not our own. Know your audience and tailor metrics to that audience and the intended actions that we wish for them to perform. So back to the title of my presentation: how critical is ROI to security? This might be a little bold, but I'd put it out there that reflecting ROI of security to the business is as important as the security program itself. All employees, from presidents to part-timers need to clearly understand the value of their security program. If employees do not see value in security, they might not adhere to security policy and procedure, threatening the very enterprise they work for and threatening the security program itself. So thanks a lot for taking a spin on my presentation of ROI and of security to the business. Hopefully my prez presented some value for you, and we've actually got the PDF deck up there as well, as I mentioned, on our website if you want to pull that down for whatever reason. Here's my contact information if you want to hit me up for whatever reason, and you can also get us at our Contact Us link on our website. Thanks for the time, and hope you have a wonderful day.